Hey Miranda, I've got a question for you.
All right.
If you had to choose to live in one of the Avatar universes, so either Avatar: The Last Airbender or Legend of Korra,
Mm-hmm.
which one would you choose?
Mm. I'd probably want to live in the Korra universe. I don't know. I enjoy the innovation and technology, the steampunky era. I enjoy that one.
Feel that? I definitely feel that. I think that that's a really good choice, just because, like, obviously, it's like it'd be, maybe really similar of like saying like, would you prefer to live now or live in like the 1800s?
Mm.
Um, but I would say, but maybe we don't have that we don't know. But I would say I'd probably like want to live in the Avatar: Last Airbender era, but like post, you know, Sozin takedown. Like I wouldn't want to live where like the Fire Nation is like.
So kind of like where the comics started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I'd be born when like Soza got to like the comet and everything happened. Like so I don't remember any of that.
Okay.
Um but like I grew up in I guess like the era where like the technology was being created.
Okay. Like
But
when
I feel like I guess that's saying like I would choose now. Like growing up how I did now.
I think the way of saying it is like like the creation of what is now, because you have Toph and her metal bending school, and all the other stuff that basically in the era of the creation of Republic City.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
pre Republic City, and then myself would be post Republic City.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. Pre Republic City.
okay.
See, I'd be pre Republic City post Sozin's Comet.
Yeah.
So like I would still technically live in the Republic City era,
Uh huh.
I guess, like would be because like I'd just be like, really I'd be old. I'd be old in Republic City. It's like I think I'd like want like my formative years, like my like the best years of our lives to happen in that
Yeah. So
area.
basically, before the Spirit Vines took over and like just screwed everything up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's
Okay.
that's where I'd like to live.
All right.
So, that's what we're talking about today though, is the
It
differences.
is.
Our differences between, the Avatar, the Last Airbender era, Aang's time, and then also like the Legend of Korra era, because there is a very, very vast difference between the two. So let's get to it.
All right. I'm gonna pause real quick. I'll edit this out. You're peaking, and your mic's popping.
That's weird. That's never happened before.
I'll go back. I don't want that.
Do I just need to be quieter? Because, like, I don't have, like, I mean,
I don't know if it's your end or my end. All right, try it.
hello, hello, hello. Do I pop? Do I peak?
Oh no,
Am
I think
I?
your user volume on my end was at 100.
Mm,
So I think that's what it is.
that's fair.
Okay, all right. We shall continue.
Continue.
All right, so we're talking about the differences between the two universes of Avatar.
Yes, yes. So, um, I think one of, like, I think the biggest things is, as we've, like, just mentioned, is that, like, steampunk machines vibe that, like, Korra has versus with, like, Avatar: Last Airbender, where in Aang's world, they were kind of, like, creating these things. Like, we got to see a little bit of it, being created with, like their kind of like hot air balloons, like the stuff that the Fire Nation pretty much had that like no one else was really allowed to like have.
Mm,
Um, but like in Korra, we see a lot more of like we have like cars and we have a little more like modern day, not
yeah,
like modern day, but like more modern day things that you would see feasibly like now as compared to back then.
yeah. So I think like still within the Last Airbender universe, it's more of a you're still kind of roughing it style. Like you have your homes, you don't have electricity yet, so everything's run off a candle, and like all that kind of like roughing it type of way of living. You still have like your fish markets that you got to go to survive, and all that kind of interesting stuff. And you go with like the air nomads and how they were living kind of deal. So just kind of like very primitive like, and then like you said, you see with the Fire Nation starting to create some new things, and Sokka putting in his part. He was kind of like a big part of all of that. But you see, yeah, as the Last Airbender goes on, you see more and more of this technology kind of being created or thought of, and the Water Tribe actually had a lot to do with it as well, with their like armored vehicles and stuff when they were in that portion of the show.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too has a little bit to do with like, like we see with like in Avatar: Last Airbender, like they're so segregated with like each nation just kind of like lives within themselves, and unless they were like escaping the Fire Nation, they didn't really like exist anywhere else but like within their like nation, so they didn't really get that like cross vibe going on, because like with like Legend of Korra, we mostly see Republic City. Like Korra doesn't go on this like adventure like Aang did, where he crossed the entirety of like the world just to like save the world. So like, but we get to see with Republic City that like everyone kind of coming together, the like nations crossing with like each other, with like Mako and Bolin having parents from different nations, but like they're all kind of like coexisting in one area, and how well that works with like how you can like progress with technology, things like that, when you're able to communicate with each other, because it's like I don't think that that would have been feasible if it wasn't for like something like Republic City bringing everyone together.
Yeah, so like with having Republic City, because Republic City was originally Earth Kingdom territory, and it's all in the comics of like Zuko wanted it back to Fire Nation, but other people wanted it back Earth Nation, but people living there were both Fire and Earth, and they're like, no, we've made families. This is where we live now, and then everybody kind of came to the compromise, and they're like, you know what, this is going to be the hub of where just everybody's included, everybody's welcome, this and that. So that then led the era to uh, all the innovations, but for also the fact that not only was it Benders, helping create all this, but then you add the non-Benders in there, like Sato and Asami and stuff like that. Like was it Hiroshi Sato? That's his name. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then Asami, and then you pave ways for even non-Benders to help change the world. Even though they don't have bending abilities. So it's just phenomenal how Republic City is like this hub of basically the world changing. It's kind of like, what is it, the industrial era, of American history kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, where like everything was kind of starting. And like, I mean, I would also kind of similarly equate it to like our technology era now, right? So it's like everyone kind of like things progressing really fast, just because like you have the accessibility to it, right? Like you have accessibility to the knowledge from like these waterbenders, and the knowledge from the earthbenders, the knowledge from these non-benders, like I think that you never had access to before, right? Because it's like we know that like there were firebenders living in the Earth Kingdom because they were refugees from like the
Mhm.
Fire Nation. They were kind of like, I don't want to be part of this. So, like they go to the Fire Nation, or they go to the Earth Nation, but like they created families, but you never really see like anything past that, right? Like we know that they exist because that's where like Zuko and Iroh ended up, but like seeing that progress faster, I think is something that like I said, I would kind of equate it like, yes, the industrial era, because like it's got that steampunk vibe, but also like something that we currently have gone through with like technology
Yeah,
progressing so
and then just
fast.
watching this show also break the laws of physics. Granted, it's a cartoon; they do that. There's no such thing as bending in the real world, which sucks. But so like just if you want to take it to like towards the end of Korra. So spoiler if you haven't seen all of Korra, which you should have by now.
Why would you be listening to
Either.
us if you haven't watched all of Korra?
But like sure enough, you have Kuvira's like giant like metal, robot machine, kind of like a. I'm not gonna say a Gundam type, but it's the Avatar. It's the Avatar equivalent of like a Gundam kind of thing. I don't know, but then you have Hiroshi and Asami's little hummingbird, like mini Gundams kind of thing, if you want to call it. And like that shouldn't happen. It's just like the way, and then like Varric gets thrown into the mix. So, but those machines were created solely by non-benders, which I think is phenomenal. And then you have, uh, was it Kuvira hired earthbenders and non-benders to build her thing, kind of deal. And then if you think about it, and you go back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm pretty sure just like the hot air balloon things were just solely firebenders. Pretty
Hmm.
sure like non-benders really didn't have much of a say in anything back then, which then you paved the way, between the Korra period and the comics. So it,
So I will say, non-benders did have like one small thing, and I forget his name, but the kid in the wheelchair
oh
created kind of
yeah,
like the first version of an airplane
mm,
being able to glide, not like fly, but he was able
he
to
was the
glide
glider.
based off of like Aang's glider that
Oh,
he had
I
used.
totally forgot about that kid.
But like that's also like that's that first like foray into seeing like non-benders aside from someone who can wield a sword, and be like a warrior, seeing non-benders exist and you know be able to contribute to society. I mean, like, yes, granted, like the glider really wasn't used as part of anything else, but like he was an inventor, and his dad was one of the ones that had like invented some of those like machines that like the firebenders were using. So like I think a lot of this is um I mean, and I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong, but I feel like a good chunk of like the machinery and stuff like that were created by non-benders.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we don't know who like with like submarines and the water tribe, like, because that's how they ran, based off of like water benders bending the water to move them. But like
Hmm.
we have no earthly idea who made them, but we do know that like the person who was making these like hot air blimp things, because they weren't just hot air balloons, they were like
They were
war
like they were like the war blimps, I guess you
yeah.
war
So like
blimps.
these war blimps were being made by someone who is a non-bender, right? So I feel like when they start, when like in Korra's like universe, or post Sozin's comet, like non-benders were a little more accepted into like society and able to help create these things, because like in my mind, and like the way that it mostly is most benders just solve their problems with bending.
Yeah,
They don't really find another way to do it, whereas like non-benders kind of have to.
yeah.
Non-benders have to find this like solution.
And
And
they have to be more resourceful with how they solve their problems. Like, oh, I don't have a house. I'm an earthbender. Boom, I've got a house. So
I mean, like, same with like water benders, they just make an igloo if they live somewhere that's cold.
there you
Like they
go.
don't, so like I think that again, I think a lot can be contributed to those non-benders being able to like, you know,
Mhm.
be more accepted, and like because I mean it was never really like a, oh, you're like a non-bender, like whatever, but like you don't really see a lot of non-benders getting to like participate, other than like you have the Kyoshi warriors and you have Sokka,
Yeah.
like in Avatar: Last Airbender, whereas like I mean, we have like Asami, but like we also know that there's like a lot more of like non-benders in the background with like building things, and like being able to utilize these things that like Asami has
Yeah.
like created.
And it's not just being able to bend things and to build things and whatnot, but you take Boomy for example. Like he was a freaking general, like underneath, Iroh, like General Iroh.
Yeah.
Like, but like, and for him, and I'll never forget it. It's like 5 seconds on screen, everyone's favorite character, and he's a
Oh,
non-bender.
100%.
Non-bender. I remember. I mean,
100%.
we could probably dig back into the archives and see our reaction to it. Be like, yeah. I mean, ultimately, he turned out to like be an airbender thanks to harmonic convergence, but you know, still nonetheless, like for the vast majority of his life, he was a non-bender and achieved amazing accomplishments.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily building or inventing things, but it was like helping protect everything. So it's not just building things or whatnot. They like I want to say that non-benders are kind of like the base or the foundation of basically Republic City. I want to say.
Look, I'm not. This might be a bit of a hot topic, but I honestly think that Republic City would not be Republic City with all of its like innovations without non-benders. I think that if it was all benders, like it would still be very primitive. They wouldn't have as much machinery as they currently do because like I'd mentioned, like benders solve their problems with bending.
Hmm.
That's just kind of like when you have a higher ability, you're gonna utilize that, right? Whereas like non-benders didn't have that, and they kind of like, as we talked about, like had to be smarter and better and more amazing, like Boomy. Um, but I think that like I honestly think that like Republic City would not be the Republic City that it is today if non-benders weren't there.
Yeah, I totally agree 100%. Like I said, we didn't get much of any of the non-benders, within the last Airbender. All we had was Sokka and his boomerang.
Well, and yeah, and the Kyoshi
Virtually all
Warriors,
we
but
had. It,
yeah.
there was Sokka, the Kyoshi Warriors. You had Ty Lee and May. Like they weren't vendors, but Ty
I
Lee.
forget that they were benders just because they were so
Yeah, like
badass.
May just
Like
kind of threw sharp objects at you, and you're like, ah, crap, And then like, what is it? Ty Lee just
with her like
basically like
boop, boop, boop.
Tai Chi, I think is what it was. Not Tai Chi.
Yeah,
It's
I forget what chi
chi
blocking.
blocking. There you go. There's a
Yeah,
chi in there somewhere. But
but I
like
mean,
again, you have like, and then so if you look at the last Airbender side of things, you just take a look at Sokka because we saw him the most. Is that he was always trying to find a solution for the problem that obviously he couldn't solve with bending. Like so he was like the inventor of the group. He was like always the idea guy and this and that. Whereas everybody else never really had any idea. They just kind of flowed off of his own ideas and kind of made them better because Sokka. Um, and whatnot. So yeah, again, I think like I want to say that like non-benders are like the base of innovation, not just in Legend of Korra, but where it all started over in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
oh yeah, 100%. If you don't agree with us, then you can just just go no.
You can start your concerns down in the comments below. We may or may not read
We might respond. No, I 100% think that non-benders are probably like the MVPs of the Avatar universe
them.
as a whole.
Yeah,
Um,
and then so when you had like non-benders, like they couldn't like obviously bend to protect themselves. So they needed like particular types of weapons. So
yes,
obviously we're going to start with the most popular, and that is the
the
boomerang.
boomerang.
Good old boomerang. I do remember that there was a clip somewhere. I think it was when I think it was like Zuko, Katara, Aang, Toph. They were all fighting Azula, and they had her back into this corner, and they're all like bending at her like with this steady stream of like water, fire, air, and earth, whatever. And in the very top corner, somebody took a screenshot. The very top corner, there's a tiny boomerang that Sokka threw. And it's just like nobody ever caught it because it was so fast and so small. I'll see if I can find it and pop it in here. But oh god, it was so funny. Like, Sparky Boom Man. I mean, so we got away with him. So yeah, so like,
Yeah,
another fun fact about like, the boomerang is that I don't know if you've seen the Dragon Prince yet, but if anybody has, um, sorry, this is going to be a spoiler alert. There's a cat butt right behind you. That's really funny.
yeah.
I can't. I like bear. Um, and anyways, so if you haven't seen the Dragon Prince, skip ahead a bit. This is gonna be a little bit of a spoiler. But the main character of the Dragon Prince is voiced by Jack DeSena, who voiced Sokka. Okay, and it's made by the same creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender. But there's an episode like halfway through the season, and he walks up to this object and he goes, "Something about this seems familiar," and then he just goes, "Boomerang?" And it was it. Like, he just made a reference to the stupid boomerang in the Dragon Prince. It's a completely different show. It has no like reference, recollection, or like coincidence. It's not a word, but like it's not related to Avatar: Last Bender whatsoever. It just has to be made by the same creators and voiced by Jack DeSena. I died when I saw it the first time. Absolutely died. It was
That's
fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah. So, and then like, of course, sticking with Sokka's deal, I think one of his major like pivotal like character development stories was with the next weapon. That's his space sword. Like that was a big turning point for for non-benders and whatnot. We'll just keep on Sokka train because he's our number one favorite non-bender.
I mean, we do love him. I think he's my number one favorite non-bender for Avatar: Last Airbender.
Yeah,
Asami's kind of like my number one overall, but
but Sokka, how could you not?
Sokka.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that space sword, I think for Sokka was also like a really good turning point for him as like he was able to master something, right? Like, he with all of like the gang, right, having mastered of their elements, like that was kind of his like contribution in his mind, I think. But like, I think it was a really good turning point for him to be like, this is like my thing, like this is something that like I am proud of.
Like I can help the group in this way, and not only do I just now have this sword, like I actually got to make it. Nobody helped me bend to make it. I made it solely myself, and like was trained and approved by this master that I am now a true warrior, a true fighter, and I can make contributions to this world. Like, and then obviously he kind of went on to be Councilman Sokka, and I just think it's hysterical, like how he referenced his boomerang, you know, with unique benders. This is my trusty boomerang, anyway. But but yeah, no, this space sword episode was massive turning point for not just Sokka, but inadvertently non-benders too, because it kind of showed the world that you don't need bending to be successful or relevant in life. You can do this and still be good.
Yeah, definitely.
And so
Sorry, I have a cat that just won't leave me alone.
we enjoy the cats, all the cats. Remember, sass bending, sass
This
bending.
is true.
So and then ooh, she looks upset.
Well, he doesn't like to be held. It's fine.
Well,
Moving on.
if I ever got a cat, I would need to be able to hold it. But anyway. So this isn't really like a weapon. So we're not just necessarily sticking to the non-bending things. We're just going over all weapons now. Is Aang's staff. So I mean, yeah, you can beat people with it, but it's not its like sole purpose. But it can be utilized as a weapon if need be. But it's a very unique object in itself.
Well, it's very unique in the fact that like, it's utilized to uh what's the word? To like help with like, oh my god, my brain just doesn't work right now. To amplify like Aang's like airbending, right? Because like Aang can't just like fly. Like he can airbend, but he can't fly. But like the staff is something that helps him be able to fly. Like it helps him kind of amplify that his like ability to bend air to then be able to like, you know, become a human plane.
Yeah, it's a tool to help him utilize his bending in a new way. Kind of.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously kind of made some improvements because it has a little snack compartment on it. So,
But yeah, also like with his staff though, like it is kind of like the only thing that we ever really fully see that like kind of like is like of that, right? So like we have these like blimps that are run by firebenders, and we have like the submarines that are run by like waterbenders, but those aren't necessarily to like amplify their bending powers, right?
yeah,
It doesn't really like help them do anything that they couldn't already do, because like as we have seen Azula fly with her own fire, because she's a psychopath that just doesn't
just her
follow
jet
the
thrusters.
laws of physics. Yeah. But like also with like waterbenders, like we know that they could technically, if they wanted to, just walk underwater by creating a bubble around them, like they don't need the submarine. Like But like airbenders can't fly without the staff, you know?
Yeah, until until what's his face from Korra. I just had a brain fart. So, anyways, so all right, and probably next is one of my favorite ones is Suki's fan. Like, you can take like a turn out of Mulan of what she did at the end of the movie too, but like the way Suki utilizes it too is much greater. But what you can do with just a simple fan just
Oh
boggles
yeah.
my mind.
I mean, and like the way that like I think like that's really interesting with like the way that like the Kyoshi warriors utilize the fan, because the fan, when like Avatar, Kyoshi was using it, was used more as a like amplifier again for like her bending, like sort of, but like she, the Kyoshi warriors took it and like utilize it as like a non-bender, right? So like Avatar Kyoshi, like a lot of times we see her utilize it with her like airbending powers, and like it kind of like creates more of like a cut with the air, like, but we don't really get to see like Avatar Kyoshi utilize like those fans in a way that like the Kyoshi warriors really do. And I think that's also really, really interesting that again, as a non-bender, took something and made it more useful.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that you can just like I think I remember seeing them utilize like in a similar form of a boomerang of like throwing at people.
Hmm.
Um, so I haven't touched much back on Kyoshi Warriors, but just like the way they would utilize the fans, because I mean, you can use them as a distraction and all that kind of other stuff. So it's amazing. I enjoy it.
Well, and I think that they're also very like under like not appreciated, but like people don't realize it, right? They're just like, oh, they're like girls, they have fans. Like they don't realize like I'm pretty sure they can cut someone's head off with those fans.
Yeah,
Like,
so it's not just a normal fan. Like it's got like needles and it's the end of it's like basically a freaking blade. So if they threw
yeah,
it hard enough at you, could probably cut your head off.
oh,
So,
100%.
I mean, domestic Koshi warriors, not only are they like bomb fighters, but just their fan skills as well. Like I said, knock somebody off their feet, distract somebody, take a weapon away. It's just the amount of things that you can do with fan are just far beyond my imagination. And I couldn't do it though, because I'm not a Kyoshi warrior though.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's no utilizing a fan in the way that they do. I could
No,
not.
I kind of wish I did too because it is extremely hot where I live. So if I could figure out how to do that, I'm a
I mean, you could
non-bender.
just. I think we're all
I
non-benders.
know. Um,
I mean, if you're a bender out there, please let us know how to bend.
yes, I would love to learn. Maybe I haven't unlocked something yet. I'm 30, maybe I'm a late bloomer like Boomy, but who knows?
We'll unlock it when we're older.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Moving on to other weapons. So we have one of our least favorite people's weapons,
Yes.
Jet's sword things.
Yeah, so like I went back and touched up on this one. So I like Jet's story is like extremely sad of, how he thought he was doing the right thing and then when he realized he needed to do the right thing, he got caught by the Daily and then kept continued to try to do the right thing and ultimately died, before he could. And the way he died was really really sad. But
I mean, but like, did he die? Like, we don't know.
hey, Toph
We
said that he did. Toph said he did. Listen,
don't.
Toph can tell. I mean, the amount of emotional trauma that Toph has probably had because for the fact that she can just, I don't know, see through her feet and feel if somebody's lying or somebody's about to die. Like, I don't know how she does it. I don't, she's stronger. Maybe that's why she's living alone in a swamp. Who knows?
That's
Yeah, right.
probably why.
But
Yeah.
I kind of went back and touched on his swords. They're kind of what are they called? Mock swords. Yeah, they have like a hook at the end of them, so they're not good for just like slicing things or anything. But obviously they live like in a jungle type environment, so it's used for like kind of like a Tarzan type of thing. You can like hook onto a branch, swing it around or whatever, grab somebody or something, throw them back down. So they're very, very versatile weapons, you know, and they're also very compact. So they're not the ultimate weapon, but if I had to choose something, I'd probably go with these mock swords because the amount of things you could do with them. You could fish with them. You can, you know, swing around like freaking Tarzan on branches and whatnot. Like it's mind boggling.
Oh, 100%. Like, and I think again, like we as we've been harping on earlier, is like, these are things that you don't see like benders use, right? Like imagine like how powerful a bender could be if they were able to utilize like Jet's mock swords and bend.
Yeah,
Like imagine, like, but like these are things that like non-benders have that like make them or kind of sort of even that playing field, right? And like with Jet, that was like one of like his biggest things was like trying to even that playing field with like the firebenders and trying to keep his like village safe and things like that. Like I think Jet's just a very he's a sad story, but he's also like a very unlikable character. But
yeah,
I think it's a case of the right idea, wrong execution for
exactly,
him.
exactly. Now, had he not died or anything, and he was trying to right his wrongs, I figured I might have been able to like him, kind of like how it was an Asami type of deal. We didn't like Asami at first. We saw her and we're
This
like,
is true.
who is this bitch? And then we were like,
Yeah,
yo,
but
she's
like
bomb, she's my number one.
I didn't like her because she was too good. Like she was too perfect.
I
Like
mean,
she
that's fair, that's fair. I mean, but again, like Zuko's story is more impressive than Jet's, but Jet was kind of like that, because Jet was a non-bender, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so he was a non-bender, so he was an underdog story, whereas Zuko was like in the limelight kind
I
of
mean, like yeah, Zuko was a prince. Like
thing. Limelight, limelight. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so it was basically kind of like the underdog story of like you've seen it 100 times in shows, like you doing the wrong things for the right reasons, kind of thing.
I mean, it's like what I said about Thanos. I agree with him. Wrong execution.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. So I mean we can talk about real world experiences and things going on now, but we're not gonna go there. We're talking about Avatar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but like as I like mentioned earlier with like if benders were to utilize the same like tools and things as like non-benders, um we do have like Zuko, I think is the only real like bender that ever kind of like utilized things like swords and well, swords. His fun little like when he was like moonlighted as like the blue spirit.
hmm
Um
yeah, he had those double swords that he would death the cat.
yeah, I've been holding them the entire time. I'm
The comedic
sorry.
timing of just cat.
He's just like, what the frick are you doing, mother?
It's like, put me down.
Okay,
I'm about
let me
to.
go back down here
Anyway,
and hold you.
but yeah, so another thing about like Zuko's swords that was versatile for him is like they could basically be put together into one sword, or you can be like, psych, it's two. So again, easy storage away on his little sheath holder on his back and everything like that. And plus, like,
Or on the wall.
so those were kind of like good things. But then you have like his dagger that he had. So he didn't use it very often, but he did have it, and it did have a big meaning to it. And he used it quite often. Tried to give it to a little Earthbender kid, and he was like, "No, I don't want it. You Fire Nation." So wound up keeping it, but it was his uncle's. So
Yeah, and I think like you know, credit to Zuko, right, for like being one of the only real people to like realize that like your bending's not always gonna get you what you want, right? Like he realized that like when he was like moonlighting as like the blue spirit, he was like, you know what? I can't just like run around fire bending.
hmm
Besides the fact that people would be like, ah, that's Zuko, like, because like people are weird like that, and it's a
yeah,
show. But like also realizing that like he can do things without his bending, which is like something that like most benders don't realize. Like, and
yeah.
we kind of like get to that in like Korra when like Amon is like taking away bending. Like it's one of those things that it's like what is a bender without their bending?
This is true. Yeah, Zuko did kind of pave the way for that. And kudos for him for realizing that you didn't always need your bending, and he was resourceful enough to use weapons and fighting styles and techniques to, to get what get done what needed to be done without using his firebending or exposing, like who he is, because that was the majority of why he had to, because he couldn't expose who he is. He was an outcast. He was a runaway. He was wanted by the Fire Nation. So kudos to him for being able to do that. Um, I think Aang kind of utilized it in a way of just kind of like avoiding enemy attacks. I do know there's that one where we just kind of like, what is it, when they were doing when they were at the Fire Nation school. Now one kid wanted to fight him, and he just kind of like kept ducking all of his attacks, and he was like, "See, I don't need my weapon." Now, granted,
Well,
that was like the only occasion that I remember seeing it. So,
well, and that was more of a like forced situation for him, right? Like, because
mhm.
he couldn't, like, he didn't know how to firebend, and they were in the Fire Nations. Like, he literally could not utilize his bending because if he used his earth bending, they'd be like,
Wait a minute.
you're an earthbender, but we're in the Fire Nation. And if he used his airbending, like God, that would have been over.
Yeah,
And like same with like water, right? Like Fire Nation, obviously, for very obvious elemental reasons, dislike the Water Nation or Water Tribe very much. Like, pretty obvious.
and then every time someone says Water Tribe, I'm like, Water Tribe.
I can't resist. I just see it
That's
in my
I,
head.
I think that's the ultimate weapon too. Is just like like the comedy of this show. Because without it, it'd just be kind of
It would just be
not
another
dense.
drama.
Yeah,
Like,
it's too full
well,
of
it would be like I think the equivalent would be like if it didn't have the comedy, it'd be similar to like I watch a lot of like the DC CW shows, right? And they have like a varying grade of like lightness, whereas like all the way on the dark side is the Arrow, and then like all the way on the light side is like I'd probably say like closer to like the Flash.
Mhm.
Um but like it'd be like more of the Arrow without that comedy, because like if you do take out a lot of like that comedy, it does hit a lot of like really dark dense points,
Yeah.
but like
I
they're
mean,
able to keep it really light with that comedy.
yeah, and I think the OG Teen Titans kind of sums that up to a T. Too.
Oh yeah.
Good old OG Teen Titans. Maybe we'll talk about that in another season. But anyway, um,
Maybe in a future season.
there you go. There you go. Well, that's
Yeah.
I it's just about as all the weapons that I can think of. What you guys?
I mean, I know that there's other weapons that are utilized like
Yeah,
in the universe, but like I think those are like the biggest ones that kind of like point out like, which is also really interesting. I guess like one of the weapons I would say that you could add onto this list, because I mean, all of our weapons are Avatar: The Last Airbender weapons, because in Legend of Korra, like pretty much most of like the weapons that we do see are ones that like Asami utilize, right? So
yeah,
like she has her like gloves.
yeah. It's just
Um,
that one.
yeah, so but like I feel like we do definitely get a lot more weapons in like Avatar: Last Airbender, because like going back to like what we've been talking about is like that difference, right? So like, in Avatar: Last Airbender, there was not that like the like technology and the communication of like all of the other like nations and stuff. So like there were like when you had like non-benders, it was mostly weapon based things, right? There
Yeah.
was a lot more fighting, whereas like in like Legend of Korra, like you have like police forces that did not exist in you know Avatar: Last Airbender, like in Aang's like time, because like it was just policed by their own communities at that
Hmm.
point, or by the Fire Nation, because we all know. um but that also like brings us to like with one of those big differences between like Legend of Korra and Avatar: Last Airbender was, in Legend of Korra people had jobs, like
Yeah,
they utilized also I think benders in more of a like job specific way, right?
that's
Like
right.
water benders being like firefighters, because like that's like the easiest way to put a fire out, is like utilizing your firebenders and your water benders to like make
Yeah.
it go away. Um,
And then you had your metal benders as your police force.
oh yeah,
That anybody could be a police officer like Mako was, but for the fact that, the special forces side of the police force in Republic City was all metal benders because they could, capture guys more easily, utilizing
Well, and
all the
it's
metal
harder
bending
to
tools.
get. Yeah, I was like, it's harder to get out of like those metal cuffs if there's no like lock on it because the metal bender is the one that put it on you.
Ooh,
You know, but like I think that's one of those like things that like comes with like that combination, right? Because like there was no real need. Well, I mean, there was a need, as we learned with like people who were bloodbending,
mhm.
trauma and stuff. But like, there wasn't as much of a need of like a police force because like they kind of just policed it within their own um
Nation.
like villages and
Yeah.
nations, right? But like with like Republic City, there was a need that was like, we need the ability for all of us to be able to like communicate and like come up with this like police force, because it's like, you need people who are going to be able to handle all sorts of people and benders and non-benders alike.
Yeah,
So
it's because like no matter where you go, there's turmoil no matter where you go. You know, people are going to disagree on stuff. We see that in the real world now, but so you have like the gangs and like you're a bender, I'm a non-bender, I don't like blah blah blah. So like any type of like unified city or nation that you would have like that, there's always still going to be that like back burner turmoil. So you would need these special jobs, for those that utilize their bending and non-bending to get these jobs done.
yeah, and like it's so different from like shopkeepers, right? Like I'm pretty sure in like Republic City, like not that we like see it, right? But it's like people probably worked at other people's shops that weren't just family owned. Whereas like in like Avatar: Last Airbender, pretty much anyone that you saw in a shop lived there. It was like that was their home. That was also their place of business to like, with like Iroh and like selling the tea and stuff. Like he didn't have any other workers but him and Zuko, like it's kind of like that was like not like jobs existed but not in the way that they do in Korra.
Yeah. So, but I think that's a good way to put our vendors and non-vendors and our weapons and like just the difference between all these worlds. That's great.
And now we piss people off. I
We
have a
probably did.
question. Oh, I mean, yeah, but like I also have a question. I
Okay,
have a question
shoot,
for
I'm
you.
sorry. Okay, me.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So
Your question.
my question, and there is no wrong answer. Which is your favorite? Avatar: Last Airbender, Legend of Korra. And now we're not talking like we started this with, right? Not where you'd want to live, but just which is
Which
your
is my
general favorite.
which is my favorite. I'm about to make a lot of people mad, and it's gonna be a cliffhanger for him too, isn't it?
About why, or we could
Okay.
just leave them. We could just leave them alone with just
All
a.
right. Well, I'll leave you with my answer, and we'll save the thoughts for next week, and then Cassidy will do the same. But for me, between Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, my heart's gonna go with The Legend of Korra.
And for me, between the two, my heart is and always will be with Avatar: The Last Airbender.
And with that being said, we'll see you next week. My name's Miranda.
And I'm Cassidy, and we're nerds, and
You
you
gotta
gotta deal
deal
with
with
it.
it. Ooh, next week's gonna. Ooh, let's see what's gonna happen on this one.